You're listening to Nonpartisan Hacks, the podcast where two Parksville councillors talk local government, the good, the bad, and sometimes the ugly. I'm Sean Wood, councillor with the City of Parksville.
And I'm Joel Grenz, also a Parksville City Councillor. Quick reminder before we get rolling, the opinions you hear on this podcast are our own. They don't represent Parksville Council or any other body we are part of, except, Sean, are you in a book club?
I'm not in a book club, no.
Okay,
no,
let's start that.
I'm in a cassette
club.
Yeah, it's pretty good. You never know what's coming.
Oh.
And you don't know where to play them.
Do you have to send them back if you don't like them to get your money back?
They don't allow you to do that, no.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think it's a gimmick.
I think I was in that and a CD club back in the day.
I was in a CD club.
And today's a milestone, episode 10, Joel Grenz. What do you think about episode 10? What have we learned so far?
I think we've learned some stuff. We've had the chance to speak to some people who know a lot more about a lot of this stuff than we do, which is part of the reason we started this podcast, was to be able to learn. Absolutely.
What I really enjoy so far is people coming up to us who we haven't talked about the podcast much, and they're like, hey, I'm listening to that and I really, really like it. And I don't know, it's just a nice feeling that people are enjoying learning stuff from the little podcast that we have.
I'm excited if people get at least a little bit excited about local government because, as we spoke about in our first episode, one of the goals of our podcast is to get people more literate in local government because it is a pretty critical place where decisions get made that affect our lives.
We're the front lines. You can go to your council meeting or your regional district meeting every couple of weeks. You can talk to the people who sit around the table. They're not removed from your community. They are in your community. And so it is the front lines of government. Very,
very accessible. Speaking of accessible, we're going to talk about something that is, I think we'll solve today in this episode, right?
For sure.
Yeah. We'll just, the housing. Housing is our topic.
Yeah. For our big 10th, we're tackling one of the hottest topics out there, housing.
Was there a script for this part?
Not really. We're just kind of winging it. Go ahead.
I thought, you did read something. Okay. Specifically, we're breaking down market housing versus non-market housing. And we're going to share a couple Parksville examples and then talk about how Courtenay Council, in our quote take, is hitting delays trying to get a non-market project moving with BC Housing.
And along the way, we'll float a big idea from Europe that might just shake things up here in BC. And Joel, it's not necessarily just from Europe because you kind of had this idea when we were chatting a couple of days ago. And so I kind of dug into it a little bit.
Okay, well, let's see if our random talking... We do talk about... By the way, we talk about this stuff over coffee and beers too, not just with a microphone.
It's true. Let's start with some definitions. Market housing is what you see most often. Private developers building homes, condos, rentals, priced at whatever the market will bear.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of like everything we buy, really. I mean, almost everything we buy is, you go to the grocery store, you're paying market prices. But non-market housing is different because non-market housing is stuff that's not priced by the market, capitalism, but it's built or managed by government, nonprofits, could be co-ops, it could be rents are geared to income or set below what the market normal rent would be. It could be, I think maybe, I don't know if this is an official part of the category, but if you've got maybe kids that are living in your basement in their adulthood and they're getting a lower than market rent, maybe that's non-market housing too. But basically, non-market housing is aimed to capture people who get left behind by the market because, as we know, housing has gotten pretty expensive.
Yeah, especially out here on Vancouver Island. We live in a gorgeous part of Canada. It's one of the warmest parts of Canada. And really, the income that people have just can't keep up to the demand on the housing prices. They just keep skyrocketing, which is great if you're already in the market. But for, say, single moms or people working frontline jobs, very difficult to get into the market. And so we as a society, I think we have decided that we do want to make sure that housing, is a priority. And non-market housing really is the only way to solve that market housing issue.
Yes, the government has actually been trying to tackle the challenge of housing prices from multiple angles over the last, decade or so. So different attempts have been made to come at it from both a supply side and a demand side. And this is maybe getting into jargon that's above my head. I'm not an expert in this area, but on the supply side, it's trying to reduce the demand for housing. And one of the ways that the government has done that is by putting restrictions on on foreign buyers, for example. So that means that there's less demand coming in from the outside for housing in our market. And then on the demand side, it would be just building more housing. So if there's a demand, clearly there's a demand for more housing, more people are looking to buy housing, then housing is available, and that results in prices getting driven up. And so you, as a government, and it's also been successive governments in BC, it's not just the current one, but going back to the BC Liberals and Christy Clark as premier, different measures were put in, like speculation tax and foreign buyer restrictions. So there are two angles to come at it. Today, we're going to talk a bit more about the demand side, which is building the housing and putting non-market housing in place to cover for those folks that can't afford to get in on the market price.
Yeah, there's one word that kind of comes up in my mind usually when we talk about market housing or housing in general, and that's the financialization of housing, where really a lot of people are in it to make money, and the difficult thing there is if you can make money with housing, well, that's going to push out people who just need housing just to live in. There's also vacancy tax. I believe the city of Vancouver has a vacancy tax. And so people can just buy stuff and sit on them. Maybe they're foreign buyers and they're just sitting on the housing and it's not being used. We definitely want to avoid a lot of those things. And that's what various governments are trying to do.
Yeah, and try to make sure that housing is actually being used for people to live in and not just being used for people to speculate on and make money on. And then you've also got, for the last several years, there have been more people coming into Canada, which is also creating more demand. And that's a federal thing where the federal government controls the amount of incoming immigration. And that also creates more demand in the market. And the province and municipalities, we don't have control over that. So I think something that we hear here and there on Vancouver Island, or you see bumper stickers sometimes that say, Vancouver Island is full. Don't come here. Don't build more housing here. Don't come live here. Unfortunately, or fortunately, or whatever you think on that, we don't control it in that way. We can't shut the door behind us here on Vancouver Island.
Yeah, I've even said it in Parksville Council meeting that Parksville doesn't control immigration. That's controlled in Ottawa. And so when immigration numbers are hitting significant kind of record amounts, either everyone helps to relieve that pressure, or we don't build any market housing or non-market housing, and that puts the pressure on other local governments to try to build the housing there. So I kind of look at it as everyone chip in, and then that will help alleviate the issue if it's kind of a team effort.
Well, for sure. And I come to this often, is that the only way things get done in a community is when everyone kind of does their job on it and collaborates and works together. And so this is another thing where with housing, we do have a challenge for sure on housing, that the prices are getting out of reach for a lot of people. And so we have to tackle this together. Federal government has a role to play. The provincial government has a role to play. And of course, local government has a role to play. Should we maybe make this a little more tangible to speak to like a recent example in the city of Parksville that you and I have worked on, Sean, picking up the baton from the previous council of the workforce housing project?
Yeah, the Lions Workforce Housing Project. That's one of the, it's all about affordable rentals for people working locally, even though it's run by the Lions Housing Society. The costs look a lot like market housing: land, construction, financing. Yeah, and that's, I think maybe we'll also touch on Orca Place, which is another project in Parksville, which is a supportive housing project. So it's kind of, I mean, we've talked on the podcast before about rungs on the ladder and of the housing ladder, and supportive housing is one of those rungs that hopefully people move from supportive housing into maybe some other form of non-market housing, and then hopefully ultimately into market housing. Yeah, so each of them are a little bit different. One thing I did want to touch on though is permissive tax exemptions. So obviously we as the city of Parksville, we collect property taxes from different properties, and typically when you have anything non-market, that property gets a permissive tax exemption where we do not collect the property taxes from that property, even though it's receiving services from the city of Parksville. And in that way, all of the taxpayers in Parksville are actually chipping in and paying the property taxes that would otherwise have been collected from that project, that non-market housing, if it were in fact market housing. The way non-market housing comes about
is that other people from the market housing segment help support the non-market housing. And permissive tax exemptions, it's a bit of a municipal mouthful, is a way that the rest of the community helps support those in the community that need the extra support. And it's, again, like most things at the municipal level, through property taxes. So every property tax bill goes up a little bit in the community to cover for the fact that the tax bill is not being paid on certain properties. And those properties are, everything ranging from churches to, what else?
Yeah, I mean, it's even the rail property, public park, recreation, athletic, youth properties, seniors housing, arts and cultural facilities, environment such as Nature Trust of BC. For housing units, we're over 350 units that are subsidized by permissive tax exemptions.
In City of Parksville, you're talking?
Within the City of Parksville. And the numbers are kind of like, I was looking up a couple of properties, and, seniors housing, they receive $16,000 a year of permissive tax exemptions that they don't have to pay, that the rest of taxpayers in the City of Parksville are collectively paying. And so that's something to take into account, that other taxpayers are chipping in, because we as a society have decided, of course, that we want to help out those who can't pay the market amounts.
And every year, these organizations that own or lease these properties that would be normally responsible for the taxes on those properties, they apply to get a permissive tax exemption, and the council every year approves those permissive tax exemptions. And in return, it's also that these community groups or churches or organizations, they're providing a service that maybe not only does the community want, so for sure that piece is that the council says, hey, we as a community, we represent the community, we want these services that this organization does and provides, we want that in our community, so we're gonna give them a permissive tax exemption for that. And it may also be that some of these organizations are providing a service that otherwise the city would provide. And so that's another sort of good value for the city, is to, okay, well, instead of us providing that service directly, we'll give you a permissive tax exemption, which is maybe a kind of a little bit more affordable way to provide the services that organization is providing.
Yeah, and on the market side of things, the idea is that the more market housing we build, that does alleviate the pressure, because you're adding more supply to the housing. And ideally, if there's enough vacancy in the market housing, then those prices ideally should come down. Tricky when you live in what I like to call the Hawaii of Canada, here on Vancouver Island, Tofino, Whistler, these are places that people would love to live. And I don't know if we'll ever catch up on the vacancy side of things, just because there's a lot of people who want to retire here, and there's a lot of pressure on the market here. But we're still doing more than our part to build market housing as well, to try to add some market supply. And we do get a lot of pushback on building market housing, but we even got some pushback for non-market housing at the Lions project as well. There was a public hearing, and we heard a lot of people who lived nearby that they didn't even they wanted non-market housing, but not near where their homes are. And that kind of talks to a little bit of the stigmatization with non-market housing that the Vienna model that we might chat about in a little bit, that might help alleviate.
Speaking of how the market works, I mean, I think people are familiar generally with that, but I'm just going to do a little bit of a walkthrough. If you look at, for example, putting your basement suite for rent, what's the first thing you do when you're doing that? Is you're going to look and see what are the comps out there, what are the comparables. If I go on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or whatever the flavor of the day is for finding those things, is what are other people charging for a similar thing? So that is the market price. You do the same thing if you're going to list a used, couch or something. Is like, well, what are couches going for on Facebook Marketplace right now? And if there are lots of couches on Facebook Marketplace, you're going to have a lot harder time selling your couch. And you're also going to have probably a reduction in the price you're going to get for that couch. And so the same thing with housing. In the city of Parksville, in our term, we're I don't know, about 3/4 of the way through now or whatever. Mm-hmm. We've approved quite a bit of rental housing, mm-hmm. and there's a delay in the numbers coming through, but I expect that we'll see an increase in the vacancy rate, which is a goal. We hopefully see that the vacancy rate is going up a little bit, because it's been very, very low. And when that happens, then landlords, they would have to reduce their rent or offer incentives or that sort of thing in order to rent out their places, which I've seen actually. I got a thing in the mail for promoting rental units in a building that we approved, I don't know, like 2 years ago, and they're just about done. They're done and they're ready to rent out, and they're sending out ads for it, and they have incentives like rent, lease today and get a free microwave or whatever it was that they're promoting to get people to jump on to that rental opportunity, which is, to me, a good sign that the market may be getting a little bit more balanced.
Yeah, that's right.
And one other thing, before I let you jump in, I wanted to mention the idea of also what we're approving in the city of Parksville or any community. But our goal, speaking for myself, is to, and I don't usually use the royal we when I refer to myself, by the way, but the goal, like my goal and what I kind of ran on as well is it's not just housing per se, and for sure having more housing is affects the market if there's more housing available, but it's also the kind of housing. And so you want to have a range of housing. Getting back to that ladder thing, is you can't just have all rental apartments or all townhomes. You need to have a mixture and a range and a diversity of housing options on that ladder so that people can move within the community up and down the ladder as their lifestyle or income or all these factors change. You have kids, maybe you need a bigger place. Kids move out, smaller place. So we need to have that diversity of housing so that we can have a healthy, balanced community. And the same thing is the case with non-market versus market housing, because the people who have the market housing are ultimately helping pay for the non-market housing. You can't just have a whole town or city full of non-market housing because you just wouldn't have the tax base to support that.
Yeah, and Parksville Council in our term, we haven't turned down any non-market housing. We have turned down a couple of market housing developments, but for the most part, we have approved a lot of market housing that has come to us, and we've approved 100% of the non-market housing that has come before us. If we owned more land as a city of Parksville, that's one way that we could, donate or lease that land for $1, for instance, to a non-market housing society.
Which still costs, that's another form of subsidy, because the cost of that land doesn't come for free.
Mm-hmm. And so you still have people who are paying property taxes subsidizing that, whether it's through a land purchase by the city of Parksville or whether it's by permissive tax exemptions. One way or another, the market housing, or both, one way or another, the market housing is paying for the non-market housing.
Yeah, exactly. And that also speaks a little bit to the capital cost of building the thing and the operating cost of running the thing. And in the city, and the other thing to add on the non-market, well, the market as well, a lot of this stuff happens when someone decides that they're going to take the initiative and bring a project forward. So in the case of market housing, the motivation is generally, yes, profit. I can make some money by developing land and building a product that people want to purchase, whether they're building a fast food place because they want to make money selling food fast, or they want to build a rental apartment building because they want to sell rental apartments or rent rental apartments. And the same as with non-market housing, you need some organization or initiator. And so Sean dropped the word Lions Housing. Lions is a nonprofit society in our community that is made up of volunteers that will bring forward initiatives to build non-market housing.
That's right. We can kind of go into our quote take from here by speaking about how BC Housing, as a kind of a department in the provincial government, actually is taking on the task of building the housing itself instead of a private developer building the housing. And Courtenay is going through the process of working with BC Housing to get housing built up there.
And I quote, quote take.
Okay, yeah. So Sean's kind of set this up a little bit. So I think we'll roll the proverbial tape on Courtenay Council meeting. This is Councillor Wendy Morin, I think is the name.
That's correct, yeah. It's Wendy.
Yeah, and we've met Wendy, I think most recently in Ottawa for FCM.
I think so, yeah.
So throwback to our FCM episode where we actually don't mention Wendy, but we did talk to her when we were at FCM. So she's here making comments to BC Housing representative who has brought a delegation to the council to speak to its specific project that was approved by the Courtenay Council, and now they're getting an update. And the timeline for this project is...
Yeah, I mean, Mayor and Council are very surprised at how delayed this project is. And so BC Housing has just presented to Council, and they presented dates that are really frustrating for the Council, because Council has been out there in the community saying, hey, this is going to open in, say, fall of 2025. And now BC Housing has presented, and maybe late 2026, 2027 is when BC Housing is saying it's going to open. And so the pressure is really on local government, and we know some councillors, and we know the mayor up there, and they want to do the best for their community. Mm-hmm. And so when you kind of go into a deal with BC Housing and you're assuming that things are going along the right timelines that you've been telling the community, and then you're surprised by the presentation, this is what has just happened. And now we can hear what Wendy has to say.
All right, here we go.
Also, my understanding is that our staff have absolutely fast-tracked this project, and maybe staff could even give me a nod that we've done everything in our power to make this happen as quickly as possible. The bottom line is we're the ones that get it. It's not the province. It doesn't matter how many times we say the province is responsible for housing. We are the ones that get the brunt of it. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. The junction went up in 18 months is my recollection. I'm not quite sure why this is different. It's just beyond frustrating. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to once again go to the community and say, this is not happening for another, 2 years. I mean, we can't do it. That this is unacceptable, and we need to do whatever we need to do to fast track this 2027 date.
All right.
It just can't happen.
She had more to say.
It has to be sooner than that.
Okay. Well, there you go.
And so this is, you can hear the frustration in Wendy's voice up there. And, obviously we're not going to play the entire meeting, but there was frustration around the table. And I kind of wanted to be able to use this as a bit of a launch pad for the Vienna model that we were digging around in, Joel. And so when government does things, it's often not fast, and it's often not that efficient. And you and I are elected to government, and so we kind of have an inside knowledge of this. There's great staff at the City of Parksville and down in the province in Victoria and up in Courtenay, but often it's not as efficient as the private market, because that's just what business does, is it tries to kind of... I always imagine, water flowing down a river. If you put a rock in the middle of the river, well, the water's going to find a way around the rock. And that's kind of what business does, is find the most efficient way to kind of flow down. And in this case, it seems like BC Housing is not delivering what they had said on the timeline that they said they would.
Yeah, and BC Housing, for those that aren't familiar, is an agency of the BC government. So its mandate is to build non-market housing, and we have worked a little bit with BC Housing in the city of Parksville, like not really directly, but they are providing, for example, subsidies for one of the non-market housing buildings that opened a couple Julys ago, and so they provide the rental subsidies for folks that are living in that. And in the case of another property in our community called Orca Place, which is a supportive housing project, they also provide the funding that pays the operator of that facility. And so the actual operations of the facility is by a nonprofit organization, and they do the day-to-day operation, and they get money from BC Housing.
Yeah, and so as we transition, we're going to talk about the Vienna model. One of the things that probably a lot of our listeners have heard of is the projects, especially in the States. One in Chicago, Cabrini Green, kind of pops in my mind. But what you don't want to have is a building that is occupied by people who need that non-market housing, and the rest of the community kind of looks down their noses at this project or this building. And when you build non-market housing in chunks where the entire building is non-market, you do get some of that stigmatization, which we've seen at a public hearing when we're going to build Lions. We're looking at approving the Lions non-market housing near another neighborhood, and the neighborhood came out, and a lot of them didn't want it near there, even though there'll probably be no problems with it when it is finally built. And the Vienna model spreads those non-market units out within market housing. So if you have 100 units built by a developer, maybe there's X percent, 10%, let's say for easy numbers, and 10 units of those spread within that building are non-market units.
Potentially, the government, rather than being always the initiator or coming in really early on a project like BC Housing does, or having a nonprofit group having to bring forward the initiative on that, speaking of the initiator, but instead of having maybe a bit of a Vienna light model where BC Housing could buy units in new developments or existing developments, really, for that matter, and buy them in theory at market rates, or maybe they can get a discount, bulk discount, to buy units and then manage those units in cooperation with the nonprofit and the person who's actually living there. And that allows for a much more rapid scale up of the non-market housing that we need, but also means that it doesn't involve having to actually build it as much. It's that then the developers just do what they do best, which is build the housing. They know how to go through all the processes on that, and they know how to also profit from doing that. And then they can actually just sell directly to BC Housing or the entity, and then that unit is just mixed in with the other housing. You've got people of different income levels and need living within the building. This is obviously only going to work with certain rungs of the ladder. Some of those rungs that require more support, those wouldn't apply there. Like Orca has much more kind of restrictions around access to the housing and that sort of thing. So this would have to be one of the sort of rungs where you're much more independent. You just have difficulty paying for the housing.
Yeah, it's less supportive housing and more just non-market.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to be said there because it allows everyone to do what they do best. And so if developers are good at building, most of the people who are listening probably live in market housing that was built by either, if you live in single family detached, a developer built your home. If you live in an apartment building, a developer built the apartment building. And so most of us, since we live in that market housing, we see that those businesses are good at building those housing units. That's what they're good at. So we'll let those people do what they're good at. Government is good at subsidizing, using taxes to subsidize things. Let the government do that with some of those units instead of the government pretending that it's good at building housing. We just heard the quote for frustration from the city of Courtenay, where government isn't maybe doing it as efficiently as what the private market.
Yeah, and we
would have
wonder
done.
why. I mean, there's the general philosophical thing about, government is not good at doing this, or that government's inefficient, and you hear that all the time in political conversation. I'm definitely a believer in the government's ability to do good. Like it is our vehicle for that. But there are different ways to do that good, and obviously this is a thing that's debated back and forth. Whether you should have the government doing the more day-to-day stuff or just kind of funding for profit-seeking companies to do the stuff. But in this case, you have the challenge that I've seen is with housing that's built by government, a bunch of other priorities end up kind of creeping into the project that wouldn't be there for a market-based project. For example, we have three blocks of apartment buildings in Parksville that were built in the term before we were in. And those, if you look at them, they look identical to the ones that are in several other places on Vancouver Island. And a friend of mine works in the industry and I think they did some work on that particular unit. And apparently they use the exact same everything. So doorknobs, light fixtures, everything is the identical in every building they build across Vancouver Island, maybe the province, because it's way more cost effective to do that. And from a management perspective, because these are rental buildings, if something goes out, if the doorknob breaks or light fixture breaks, they can very easily be like, here you go, here's the new one. We'll get it fixed up really quick and efficient. Whereas with the BC Housing projects, the engineering on those is done specific and uniquely to that project.
One-offs.
Yeah, it's a one-off design, and the requirements around that are very unique and specific, and they're trying to address a bunch of different goals other than just to build the most efficient, quick, and get to market, get housing, get people living in these houses as quickly as possible.
Yeah, one of the things that I'd love to read is kind of BC Housing's how much it costs per unit when they're done building it, because the lower that cost, then the better it is for the taxpayer and probably the quicker it is to get to market. But the higher those costs per unit, when you compare it to a developer who builds just market housing, you're actually building expensive housing for non-market use. Whereas if you can keep those costs as low as possible, then you're getting that unit hopefully to market faster, but it's also more cost effective for the taxpayer. And you're not building expensive housing, you're building non-market housing to get people with a roof over their head right away.
One thing that on all this discussion that I do want to add is that we're learning a lot. This is a very complex issue. I think as a society, we're learning for sure. But Sean and I'll speak for you, maybe the royal we. We're definitely learning a lot going into this. And as I mentioned, I went into local government and just politics in general with a definite belief that government is a tool for good and can be used. I mean, you hear a lot of rhetoric, especially maybe out of the U.S. about, government is the problem and government's in the way, and that I don't believe, but I do believe that that sometimes other priorities start to. And when in government, other priorities start to cloud what the real priority is. So if the real priority is to build housing quickly, affordably, get people into homes so that they can not be in a precarious situation with their housing, which is an urgent need, we need to treat it as that and not layer on a bunch of other priorities that will get in the way of that. And so at the council level, we do our best to try to smooth things over in order to make it more efficient and affordable. For example, our staff fast tracks things that are non-market housing. This actually came up in our last meeting. One of the councillors asked, why aren't we doing this particular process and this consultation for this non-market housing? Staff response, well, because we actually have a bylaw that was established that we all agreed on, that we would make every step of the process for non-market housing more efficient, more quick, and less red tape. And that's what we've decided, I think, as a society that we want to do and that we need to do. So we do hit the challenge, though, where these other priorities creep in and make getting that housing out the door a little more challenging.
Yeah, so Joel, I think we covered market versus non-market in a nutshell. Market gets built when the math works, and non-market gets built when government or non-profits step in. And maybe we need to get a bit more creative, whether that's Vienna style or something made in BC.
On the creative side, let's ask the listener, right? If you have thoughts on this and want to come on the show and talk about it, we're using this as an opportunity to learn. And this is a super, super challenging issue for sure, but it's also very critically important that people have housing. It just cascades down to so many other things. If you have so much of your money going towards housing, then it also puts you in a precarious position around, food security and any number of things and the societal challenges that come with all that. So I think, with that, we'll wrap it up on this episode of Nonpartisan Hacks.
And hey, if you're listening on nonpartisanhacks.com right now, consider subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Substack so you get notified when the next episode drops.
Or sign up to get new episodes straight into your inbox at nonpartisanhacks.com/subscribe.
That's episode 10. Thanks so much for sticking with us this far. Until next time.
Yeah, really appreciate it, by the way. Thank you for the folks that have reached out and thanked us for what we're doing here. Really appreciate the encouragement and welcome you to come on and talk about these issues so we can, all get a little bit more familiar with what local government can do and how we can have a better place to live.
Thanks so much. Take care of yourself and your community. Much appreciated.
Thanks for listening.